Well, good evening and welcome to our next installment of the Village Law Initial Consultation. I'm Darren Lutton, admin at SEQFC. And tonight we've stepped up in the world. We've got a national manager on our hands, Karl Dodd. Good evening.
How are you, Darren? Good to see you.
Very well, thank you. Now, you've just told me that you're back at the Gold Coast with your family.
Yeah, just come back to ride out the virus and be around my wife, we're pregnant, 20 weeks next week. So good time to be back and spend time with family during these times.
Exciting times for the Dodd clan.
Yes.
Yes, stuff. All right, now let's talk about your football career. Let's start with your juniors. Where did you grow up and where did you play?
So Palm Beach, played at Palm Beach Soccer Club when I was 5 until I was 17 and left high school. So that's had a big part of my life. Played some the state football as well with them, state league football or Forex league back in the day, and played with them, and then moved on to the Brisbane Strikers. Was fortunate enough to get a professional contract with them for 1 year before it had a break, and then the ALeague come around. So
sure,
yeah.
But before we get to that though, let's just focus on your junior career for a little bit.
Yeah.
Palm Beach, were you tall as a kid?
No. Yes and no. Like during primary school, I was all right. Decent height, but I was a very late maturer. So I didn't have my growth spurt till I was 16, 17. So it was kind of interesting period, those teenage years for me as a footballer. So
okay, were you best in your team for your age, or were you struggling?
Well, I was struggling physically. So obviously when I was 12, 13, I did all right, made a rep team and so on. And then the year after, everyone else was growing and I wasn't. And so I missed out. So I missed out on a lot of the rep teams in the Queensland football for, a 4 or 5 year period until I'd caught up, when I was 16, 17. So like I said, it was interesting period for me, so yeah, I mean, late developer, but I mean, that kind of has an impact on me now as a coach. You kind of look at those things as well, like don't forget that player. So, I mean, from the rep teams, it's quite interesting that being a 1980 born, I'm probably one of the only ones that went on to make a professional career out of that age group,
Okay. Being dropped or not included in the follow-up teams, did that make you work harder? How did you cope with it?
Yeah, I didn't know how to take it at first, to be honest. It was more of a frustration because you don't know, in your head, you're seeing things, but your body just can't keep up, being a late developer. So, yeah, you do work harder at your game. And I don't know whether that was a good thing during that period, like doing too much. Like I used to train twice a night. I trained with my under-16s team, and then I would train with the Colts or the under-19s back in the day, three times a week. So that was 6, training sessions, and I'd always be at the club just training, just trying to play catch-up, So from a technical point of view, it was good, but I think physically maybe I was overdoing it. I couldn't tell you, but I did work. It did make me work harder, that's for sure.
6 sessions a week was school not a factor for you?
No, it was. I kind of lived and breathed football. So you finish school, come home, have your Vegemite sandwich, get on the bike, go down to training for your first session, and then you hang around for the second session. And yeah, homework was always an issue, but I love football, and then you do that whenever you can play, and then on the weekends it was play your game, and you'd be refereeing as well, earning some extra pocket money, and then watching the seniors play, all 3 grades, the 19s, the reserves, and the first team. Saturdays were great for me. It was just a whole day of football, and you couldn't get enough of it in my eyes.
How were your family and coaches during this period?
Well, my old man was a coach. He was a senior coach at Palm Beach, funnily enough, but never really kind of got involved with my football. I think he'd understood like that air of nepotism. He didn't want to get involved in that. Like you see a lot of coaches and players or their siblings, their sons or daughters, but it's it doesn't matter whether they're transparent or not, or there is no nepotism. It's still the perception of that, and I think he was very aware of that. So he would always, go to the extreme to stay away from that. And they were supportive. Mum was supportive as long as there was three of us boys. So I think she was happy we're out of the house. So that was that side. But no, they were supportive, and coaches. I was very fortunate. When I grew up, all my goal was just to play for Palm Beach first team. That's all I knew, and that's all I wanted to do. And it was a very successful club in the Gold Coast back then. I think I don't ever remember losing a premiership or a championship in my whole time I played there. Like every year we were, winners or, in the finals all the time. So it was a very successful club when I was growing up. And, there was a very competitive element to it as well. And a good culture. The senior players were excellent with the younger ones. And, they were very opening. I think I was a 14-year-old training with the under-19s, and they were great. Very accepting. It's like, yeah, come on, this kid wants to do extra training. Come and join in. And the coaches were excellent. And I remember, I'm not sure if you know Duncan McKenna, who's his dad. His dad's a very famous person. He passed away a few years ago. But Dunk was the president of Palm Beach. But at that time, he was the under-19s coach. And I remember pre-season, I just so badly wanted to play in the under-19s, and he just, at the end of that pre-season, he just told me no, and I was like crying. I couldn't believe I didn't make the under-19s, and I was 14. But looking back, I was like, what was I thinking that I was going to make it? I'm 14, but I was just ambitious and just wanted to play, and But good stories, good coaches, and it has a very fond place in my heart, Palm Beach.
Were you playing as a defender the whole time, or?
No, I used to play as a midfielder, so central midfielder. Obviously, not the quickest, but so played centrally. And it wasn't until I was probably 18 or 19 that I got moved back into a sweeper or in a back three, and then from there it kind of kicked on and felt a lot more natural.
What was the thinking at that time?
We had a very good team at golf. Sorry?
Was it just filling a gap?
Well, we had a very good team with Palm Beach, or Gold Coast when it was, Adam Porrick, Cameron Watson, some really good players, and it was probably too many for the midfield. So it was kind of like I was the younger one, and maybe let's try him out, the pecking order, so you can go and be the guy at the back, So he played me in a game, Kenny Lindsay played me in a game at sweeper, and I did well, and then from there it kicked on. It just felt natural, and whatever the team needed, that was the mantra at Palm Beach or Gold Coast at the time, And when you've got that many good players ahead of you, older players, you're just happy to be a part of it,
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that season at the Strikers.
Yeah. Well, the season before that one, I was trialling with the Strikers. John Cosmina invited me up, and I was trialling, and he actually offered me a contract. And then that week, he offered me the contract. I tore my ACL at a Strikers training. So I was gutted. I'd worked so hard and made it. This was my chance. Never got to put pen to paper. Had to do a whole, year of, rehab. And I think I got back playing within 5 months, 1 week. And that's way too early for an ACL rehab. But I was so keen to get back and get that contract and sign again. So I did my rehab. I missed that season. Stewie McLaren was in charge for the last season. So he invited me back up and just, trial again, see how you go. And again, like I said, I was up there and I did well, and Stewie signed me. And then we had an excellent season with the Strikers. I think, we had an excellent home record, and it was a really good team of Queenslanders, a lot of Queenslanders in that team. And we just gelled really well, and it felt natural, like players we never played with before. And it was a really good spirit, in that group.
Do you remember the game where you had two strikers up against you? I was following the Strikers at that stage. So there's this one game, you had two strikers going up against you. You've casually darted around them. The hooligans on the hill, which I was a part of, it's on the big, hey! Not only did you keep dribbling away with the ball, but you turned around to the supporters and gave us all a cheeky wink.
That was, maybe my young days. Yeah, I to do. It was against wasn't Wollongong or Sydney United? Was it a team in red? I can't. I think I remember what you're talking about in the corner in the 18-yard box and got round the guy and evaded. Yeah, I do remember.
It may have even been Perth Glory and Damien Murray and Bobby Despostovski.
Yeah. Well, it was probably I didn't know. It was probably good I didn't know who they were back then. That I think knowing who they were, you're like, maybe I wouldn't try that again. Being young, you kind of a little bit, not say reckless, but confident, overconfident,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was good.
Your quality was there for all to see that season, and I think we all knew that you were going to, go on to greater things. And then the NSL shut down, didn't they?
It did. It was frustrating because I actually tore my other knee, ACL, at the end of that striker season. I think it was the third last game of the season, and I was just, gutted because we had finals football, so I missed out on that. And I'd actually had something in Romania that year, a contract to go on to, but everything kind of fell apart, and it was just a matter of, we've got 14 months now to the A-League started. What are we going to do? So I just, I obviously had to do rehab, and I was a lot more diligent with that rehab. I wasn't in a rush to get back, so I was like, just need to make sure the body's right, everything like that. But it was a long time, and I think football in Australia lost a lot of good players with that break. I was a young player, so I was doing whatever it took to play. But in my opinion, I think the NSL had a lot better players in terms of technically and skillfully. And the A-League at the start had a lot, there were still good players, don't get me wrong, but I think the caliber of player back in the NSL was better. And a lot of those players missed out with that break. Maybe they went on to other jobs, or coaches looked, I think there was a big push to make it a quicker league. And I think they went a lot more athletic based, and, it wasn't really the way for me. I think if you had sports science and strength and conditioning, you just had to make those guys full-time professionals, because everyone had to work, majority of people had to work as well, a second job, and, get them in a better shape, and it would have been a lot better. But that's my opinion, like I said, I've played in the NSL and I've played in the A-League, and I think back then, the caliber was a lot better of player that was going around.
Did you enjoy the A-League?
I did. It was a different challenge. I mean, I was at 3 startup clubs, with the Raw, with the Phoenix, and with the Fury. And it's very hard when you go to a startup club, because there's no identity, there's no culture, there's no, scoreboard of what that club has done in the past. So you're starting afresh, and it's very hard. Like if you go to a club that's established, like a Sydney FC now, there's all this history to it. So there's a lot more confidence when they go to those clubs. When you start out, you're literally the whipping boy. And I know the first year with the Raw, it was an interesting one. We had Mirren as the coach, and it was the Lions coming in and strikers, and there was that animosity between the two, and, maybe some boys from the strikers didn't get signed that should have got signed because of that animosity. I don't know. I mean, I'm not the head coach, but that was my opinion. So Mirren had his ways of how he operated, So the A-League was good. Like it's good, but like I said, it's still growing, or has grown. But I mean, now it's at a point with good chance for it to be restructured, I guess, and done a bit better than how it has been done.
Yeah, we've seen a few articles recently about it's an opportunity to hit the reset button and relaunch and give it a little tweak and make it perhaps a bit more palatable to the footballing audience.
Yeah, I think the worst mistake they did was ruling out the ethnic clubs, a lot of established NSL clubs, and because they had ethnicity behind them. And I kind of felt like that was a kick in the teeth to Australian football, because that's what we're built upon. We're a multicultural nation that has, you look at how many cultures there are, or ethnicities in the country, and that's what it's about. And you kind of look forward to those games, and you're playing against a team that's got a Croatian base, or a team that's got a Greek base. That identity was kind of lost, and we lost a lot of supporters, and sponsors as well, because it kind of just like pushed them away and let's start again. I was like, we didn't have to go about it in that way, in my opinion. I think there was a better way we could have gone about rebranding the league, and it didn't have to like cull all those clubs with that background. Okay. Yeah, that's again my opinion.
Sure. Let's move on now to your overseas adventure.
Yeah.
So it's Universitatea Craiova.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. Well, I wasn't there that long, so there was a few other Aussie boys there, and when I'd gone over, I had osteitis pubis when I was at the Raw, so I had a few injections to get through, and I was coming back from it. So I went over there, and I didn't really settle into the club, and I didn't get paid for a month or so while I was there. So I was only there for like 2 or 3 months in Romania, and it wasn't a good place in terms of, Craiova's 3 hours outside of the capital city, and it's Eastern European. So, you're on a 3-hour train ride in the middle of nowhere. You're alone, you've got a mortgage to pay. Like, it's just a different world, and you're not getting paid. So it was a very scary time for me as a player. And so I was looking to get out, like, how do I get out? And one of the younger Aussie boys that was there, he put me in touch with Daniel McBreen, who'd been at Craiova and was at Falkirk. So there was a connection somehow. So I called him and we chatted, and Falkirk were about to get relegated, well, in a relegation fight in the Scottish Premier League at the time. And he just said, oh, look, we need defenders. I'll put you in touch with the gaffer there. And so we spoke, and they took a punt, and they flew me over to Falkirk for a trial. So I trialled there for a week, and I reckon it was the best week of football I'd ever played, because I was so desperate just to get a contract and play, you know what I mean? So did really well in the trial, and they offered me a contract for the rest of that season. We managed to stay up, which was huge. I'd never been in anything like that in my life, like the relegation battle. It's just a different world, the pressure that you're under. Like, you can't make a mistake, or else you lose the game, and you're talking about livelihoods. You get relegated, a lot of players will lose their jobs, big pay cuts, things like that. So it was a different beast that I'd never seen. So we stayed up, and I signed again for another year, and we did really well for a small club, So I loved it in Scotland. Yeah.
The thing that we're getting through, as you're talking about all these clubs, is things don't seem to be 100% set and settled, and you're switching between clubs, and I'm sure managers are changing as well. There's all that uncertainty. What skills did you have, or framework did you have just to keep yourself mentally together through it all?
Yeah, I guess it's something that's only, become prominent in the media, or I guess in society now, the mental health aspects, but it's not a good place to be in, especially, when you've had 2 knee reconstructions back to back. Like, they're dark places. You're on your own a lot of the time doing rehab, and people don't understand what you're going through, because it is a long time doing that rehab, and you're doubting yourself. Am I going to get back to being the player I am? What if the other knee goes? Like this? It's so many unknowns, and it can be scary. And then when you're putting everything on the line to get a contract, and especially when you're in another country, and things aren't in your control, and you're constantly trying to present yourself or demonstrate that you're good enough, it does become like highs and lows, and it's hard to balance out, because it's not a normal job. You don't have the stability of 9 to 5. I get weekends. It's like, even training is life or death. The training sessions in Falkirk were unbelievable. Like, every session was like a World Cup, because you're vying for a spot. And I remember when I signed, there was 5 other centre backs there, and I've signed, and I was thinking, why did you sign me? These other 5 are just as good. And it just comes down to like one mistake. Like, at training all week, if that player makes, a mistake and you've done well, then you get the spot. And then in the games, you make one mistake, you're out, next one in. It's so cutthroat. And that's something you're not used to, because in Australia, we're so lucky here. The competition for spots is nowhere like it is in Europe, or in Scotland when I was there. So that's also tough. You've got to get your head around that, and every day get ready to go again and present yourself in the best manner. And you learn your routines, how do you get yourself ready. But the mental side, I think, like I said, that was never worked on when I was a player coming through. You know, even to the later parts of my career, it still wasn't prominent. You know, a psychologist was seen upon as, oh, what's your problem? You know, you've got a problem, you've got to go and see a psychologist, you know, and they don't understand how important a sports psychologist is. You know, just to help from that mental side. That's the hammer hitting the nail, you know, that analogy that the body's the nail and the hammer is the brain. So if that's not switched on, you're not hitting it right. So it's, yeah, it was tough, and you learn a lot about yourself. But it would have been good to have a guide on how to cope with those things better.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Do you think the fact that you were a 14-year-old trying to make the under-19 side, just drawing back on those times, assisted?
Well, I just think that was my mentality. Like, you couldn't tell me no. You know, if you said no, I was like, all right, I'll show you. Let's go. I'll prove you wrong. You know, it was just how I'm being built. You know, you have that competitive mindset. But yeah, definitely, if you had a sounding board back then, it would have been you know, your coaches are good. They're like, listen, you're young, you know, keep working, keep doing what you're doing. But I think in your head, you don't see it that way as a player, because you're like, well, I want to play, you know, which is not a bad thing. You want players to play. So, but yeah, a sounding board would have been helpful. But yeah.
All right, you've already touched on your time with the Fury and the Phoenix. I'll just grab your opinion on this before we move on. The Phoenix, do you think they're a valuable part of the A-League competition, and there's something that we should stick with?
I do. Yeah, I definitely do, because, you know, logistically and especially working in Asia now, we're so far away from everything else, and it can become stagnant. But having that, not the novelty, but having a Wellington side there adds another dimension. You know, that derby between New Zealand and Australia, so to speak. As long as it's, in my opinion, a predominantly New Zealand team, that's another kind of derby feel. But I definitely feel that they do add to the A-League. We have to help, you know, assist with New Zealand football as well, because, you know, they're not going to have a professional league. They don't have the teams, and we can only have, 10 teams or 11. So, you know, I don't see a negative to it at all.
Okay, yeah, that's good. All right, let's talk about the tail end of your career now. So we had Pegasus, Moreton Bay, and then you finished up at Palm Beach.
Yeah, so I'll go back one before that. So was it, because it stems from the Fury. So I was at the sign with the Fury and had a knee injury, you know, and it was the T-junction. If this operation doesn't work, I'm kind of, that's it for professional football. So I had this operation. It was a 16-month rehabilitation, this one, where they take the cartilage out, because I had a big hole in the top of my knee with no cartilage. So they take a piece of cartilage out, grow it in a lab for 6 weeks. You go back in, they stick it in, and it's supposed to mature or grow over a year. So it was a long rehab, you know, 16 months rehab. And then when I was coming back from that, I was just like nowhere near the same. And so that just drops your level hugely. And it failed. The graft just disintegrated, which was, you know, frustrating as hell, because I've just spent 16 months rehabbing, and I was trialing at Melbourne Heart at the time as well. And I'm like, after I come back, and I was like, okay, there's something here, and I just couldn't handle it. And then this contract come out of the blue from Hong Kong. So I was like, all right, look, I'll see what it's like. So I went over there and played there for a year, and it was probably not the greatest thing for my knee, because it's all artificial pitches in Hong Kong, bar one club. So you're training on artificial hard, and, you know, my knee's just copping it. There's the size of a tennis ball behind my knee of fluid every week that I've got to try to drain. And it's just not a good process. And I was like, you know what? At the end of the season, I'm done. Come back. Terry, I was doing my A license, and Terry Kirkham was the coach at Moreton Bay, and he's like, oh, come play. And I'm like, well, I don't know how much good I'll be, but I'll come and train and help the younger boys out if they want some advice or anything like that. So I was doing all right in training, because there is a big drop in the intensity, so I could kind of handle it somewhat, getting around. So I had a kick about it and did okay. But I always said to Terry, as long as I'm not taking a younger player's spot, then I'll play. If there's a younger player that's ready to go, what am I going to gain out of playing in the NPL? So, he was good with that, and we played. And then, you know, I got coaching jobs after that. You know, I went down to Newcastle, and then after Newcastle finished, I come back and played with Palm Beach, which was probably the best way to go out. It kind of just fell really well, like how it worked out with winning the league and winning the grand final at my junior club. And I was like, well, this is the best. You can't script this, you know. So it was a good closure to my career, you know, in a sense, and very, very fulfilling one, because, you know, to finish off where I'd started and had so much time there was, yeah, I loved it.
Perfect.
Yeah, can't complain with that one.
When did the desire to coach happen?
Very young. I mean, I used to follow, you know, the football around. My old man used to coach, you know, I think I was 2 when I was a ball boy at his training sessions, things like that, where I was always around the football club. And, you know, you're after games, and as a young boy, you know, your old man's in there talking to the other coaches, and you're hanging around like, can we go? But, you know, you stay there past closing time, just listening to other coaches. And it's something you just, I don't know whether you're nurtured into that, but it was just something I always wanted to do. And when I was at the Strikers, we started our coaching badges then. So when I was about 20, the old coaching badges, the level 1, level 2. So started those ones. Then there was a big gap, obviously, because I was playing. And then I started my B and A. So I'd finished my A in about 2013, 14. So then I've just finished my pro license now, just got off that one. But the desire was always there to coach, because I know I'm not going to play forever. So I was always working on that and studying as well. Did tertiary qualifications as well, you know, human movement science and psychology, and then a master's in exercise science. And I was always thinking, like, you spend a lot of time watching coaches and the environment. You need to know, like, every role. Like, you need to know what the physio does, the sports scientist, the assistant coach, the doc. You need to know how they all operate, because you're the manager of that. You don't just, you know, putting the session on is like 10% of your job. So having that background and qualifications has really helped me as a manager.
So talk about your Western Pride years, and then Guam.
Yeah, so Western Pride probably set me up really well for Guam, because you don't realise till you're there how hard it is. So going to a new club, and Casey did a great job getting them up and running and taking over, and you're just kind of looking at the club thinking, well, everyone thinks it's a long way. You know, like I used to drive up from the Gold Coast to Brisbane every day for football. You know, so I'm like, an hour is nothing, you know. But for a lot of people in Brisbane, it's only 30 or 40 minutes, and they're like, oh, it's so far. And I was like, are you serious? Like, this is 3 nights a week, you know, that's not far. So you got those perceptions, and then it's Ipswich, you know, Western Pride, again, a new club that hasn't done anything. So I kind of went in and thought, well, let's take a different approach. We can't get top players, you know, so let's have a youth approach. Let's use this club and create a club where it develops players, which was the premise of the NPL anyway. So I went with a very young team, a lot of 17-year-olds, you know, and thought, well, this is going to be a long-term strategy. If I can get a group of 17-year-olds around that age that want to become professionals, that are willing to train, you know, the same kind of ilk, same kind of mentality, where they all want to work hard and become professionals, you know, this is going to pay off over the years, you know. And I said it was a 5-year plan. You can do both, develop players and win the league. But, you know, at 17, they're not ready. You know, it's like a yo-yo. It's one game they're good, the next game it's like, what have I got out there this week? You know, where are they? And that's what it was like the first year. It was like highs and lows, and they were big highs and lows, you know. It wasn't a little one, you know. So it was good in that sense. Like, it was tough. Like, it was tough to find players, to find coaches, change a mentality, you know, and overall like a cultural change. So that was tough, but it set me up well for other, you know, went to the Raw, and there was similar things. We had to make some changes there, but then to Guam, it's very similar, where it's small population size, you know, so you can't get rid of those players. You're stuck with them because it's a national team. So you know, it's tough, you know, financial limitations, same as Western Pride, you know, and then it's not a big club. It's not a Japan, you know, it's a national team, sorry. So it's not a big national team, you know, it's not your Japans or your Australias. It's very small. So you are the underdog, but having those previous experiences didn't frighten me or scare me off from Guam. I was like, okay, here's another challenge. I just need to sit down, do your strategic plan, draw it up, make sure it's right, and then you got to deliver it. And it's a different way of coaching compared to when you're at a top club. The top club, the pressure, or top national team is to win every game because you're expected to. With Guam, it's a different expectation. It's about development. Yes, we want to win, but how do you manage expectations? Because realistically, like, we're not going to beat a lot of the teams we're in now in round 2. Like, we're lucky to be there, if we're being honest, punching above our weight. So it's hard. That's hard to manage, even from my point of view, because I want to win every game. So it's like every loss you feel even harder. It's like, oh, we could have had something, or you come so close, but you've got to also manage your expectations. These players aren't full-time professionals like the other players are in Syria or China or Philippines that were in our group. You know what I mean? So it's a really interesting challenge. Good group of boys, and it's excellent in my opinion as a young coach to cut your teeth this way, because I was at a club like Palm Beach where I won everything, so I know what a winning mentality is. I'm used to that, but I'm not used to being on the other side. What's it like to lose? Not on a regular basis, but like more often than winning. So what's that like? What's it like when you don't have all the finances to buy players? What's it like at a national team where you're stuck with those players? Like, that's it. It's a small population size. So they're good challenges. Yeah.
Let's just pad that out a bit. Of course, Guam is in one of the islands, Micronesia, right?
Yeah.
You've got a population of about 170,000.
Yeah, 170.
How many of those are playing football?
I think it's about, in total with the girls, I think it's about 1,500. But there is a big percentage of that are masters players. Yeah. So, when you talk about, you might have 10 teams in the men's domestic league, there's only 2 to 3 that are okay. There's a big drop off in quality, and that's what you get, like in each age group, that big drop off. So, for example, the under-16s national team, I probably have 36 players now, but that's over a 3-year age. So that's 3 years of players that I have 36. And then the 19s is about 25 to 30, again, over a 3-year group of players. When you're comparing, I remember we had an under-15s tournament the first year I was there, and I was talking to the South Korean coach, and I was just like, how do you go about identifying your players? And he just said, when they're 12, we identified 200 players for the national team. And I was like, sorry, what, 200? I don't even have 200 in all of my men's national teams. And you're just like, wow, how good would that be? So that's kind of gives perspective what you're up against with the island compared to the bigger national teams. And you're just in awe. Like, you would love to have 200 national team level players, for that age. But it's a good experience, like, we just had the under-19s tournament in November, and the boys did really well, considering, because, again, we're very young. So, like, the Japanese team and Vietnamese are 2001 born, because that's the age for the 19s. When I've got predominantly 2003 and 2002 born players. So we have very young teams that go in and play, and they do all right. They hold their own, considering. But it's just another, like, challenge. And then, again, you've got to, because the players can come away from that and be mentally destroyed, because the pressure, it's a national team, they've got to perform well. They can come away, like, we lost 10-0 to Japan, and the parents are like, oh, you lost 10-0. I was like, yeah, but 2 years ago they lost 20-0. So there's improvement there. They're getting better. You just don't be so hard on these kids. They're playing against, a lot of these Japanese players in the under-19s were professionals in J2 clubs. And, my boys are at school. So you're like, just don't be so hard on these kids. They're doing well, understand where they're at in the whole pathway, and they'll be better for it when they get into the men's. So it's interesting.
Are you spotting any that you think could go on and make a career professionally?
Yeah, there are a couple. Like in the men's, there's probably 2 or 3 that, if given an opportunity, that aren't playing professionally at the moment, could well do so, And then in the younger age groups, there are some good kids there. It's like anywhere, I think Arsene Wenger was the best for it, finding players in like remote places of the world. And you do find some diamonds in the rough there, and there are a couple in Guam, especially in our under-16s, because now they're being taught. Before they weren't being trained. So before I got there, the clubs don't train, or they might train once a week. And you compare that to Japanese players who are 6 to 8 times a week over a 5-year period. How do you compete? So the first thing was we need to train at least 4 times a week, 3 to 4 times. So these kids are getting the training, and the younger kids have obviously got it earlier, so they'll be better for it. So these kids in the 16s, there's some good players in there. So it just takes time for those kids to then graduate into the men's program. Players that have been taught properly all the way through. A lot of the men's in the 19s have only had a couple of years of training, like proper training. So yeah.
Sure. Look, I'm sure that everyone watching now, once this finishes, they're going to go to Google and find out where Guam actually is.
Yeah. The easiest way is it's straight under Japan. It's a 4-hour flight south of Japan and straight up from Brisbane. So if you're in that line, you're okay.
There we go. And I'm sure they're now about to become everyone's second favourite national team.
Second, yeah.
Karl Dodd, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much for your time. And appreciate another Village Law initial consultation.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Karl.